Hi, today we're going to focus in on Lady Macbeth in the play of Macbeth. So what we want to look at is a couple of interesting things we can say about her character. So first of all, let's start with what people believe about women in Shakespeare's time. Now, some of you will remember this, some of you may not, but I want to start with, first of all, what Shakespeare's audience believe about women. Remember, thinking is heavily influenced by the Bible and by what the Bible says about women. So Shakespeare's audience would have believed that women needed to be guided and ruled over because they were more susceptible to sin and temptation than men. You saw this in Romeo and Juliet earlier, where you would have seen the fact that Juliet's always kept in a room, and it's very much women were chaperoned and guided because women had less spirit than men over here. They were more open to dominance. And when we say dominance, we mean dominance by the devil, by evil thoughts, evil spirits, which is why, of course, there's also a high proportion of witches in the mythologies around this time. Women were the instrument of man's downfall in the Bible, and this is where all of this comes from. This whole thinking here comes from Eve in the first pages of the Bible. Basically, it's through her that man falls, that original sin and this whole belief of this end of this paradise, it all comes because Eve listens to a talking snake. Now, so if you look, Eve is punished for listening to the talking snake, the serpent, and persuading Adam to eat the fruit. Now, she is punished with a desire for her husband. That's her punishment, that she is always going. And now this, basically, think about this. This is like a lust, and she's going to do anything for her husband. That's her punishment. Adam is punished, and this is the interesting part. Yes, he's punished with hard work, but his punishment isn't for eating the fruit. It's because he listened to his wife, then ate the fruit. Men are expected to be strong and to be dominant within the household, and a lot of those beliefs that we had, if you look at that system of strong man, woman doing what she's supposed to, it comes from the Bible. Now, let's look at that for a second. I want you to think about how you see that in Macbeth. You think about Lady Macbeth and Macbeth. Macbeth listens to Lady Macbeth and is persuaded to kill the king. It echoes a common idea in Shakespeare's time, and this is basically what it would have been accepted. This is something that would have been accepted and believable. Oh, look at her. Not, isn't she awful? Oh my God, what a strong woman. It would have been, oh yeah, she's evil. You shouldn't be listening to your wife because women will lead you to your downfall. Women will lead you astray. Now, the other thing I want you to avoid is this belief that they didn't believe that women in this time could be strong. Of course they did. There's a woman ruler for 45 years until 1603. Queen Elizabeth I rules. They are aware that women exist and that they can be powerful on a political stage. Although there is a difference between the ruling class of women and other women, they do believe that there are differences in who. Because Elizabeth is ordained to be queen by God, there's a difference there. But with this, strong women are not uncommon on the stage. In Shakespeare's time, while Shakespeare is going to school, you've got, from what I can work out, let me try that again. While Shakespeare is studying and going to school and everything else, he would have been reading Medea. Now, Seneca is a Roman playwright, and it's all about a woman standing center stage. And this play was performed live, that people would have seen this in the richer households, not everywhere. But the play is about a vengeance of Medea against her betraying husband. Okay, now, Medea dominates the play. Over half the lines in the play are spoken by her. And when she speaks, and it's all the themes and everything, all the themes and ideas that come out of there. She's punishing humanity. She is superior to the other characters. People have seen women on the stage being strong, being powerful through the Roman plays. Shakespeare is heavily influenced by Seneca. Shakespeare is heavily influenced by this sort of tragedy, this sort of writing. Look at how she speaks. Thou craven villain, for it is the only name my tongue can find for thee. A foul reproach upon thy unmanliness comest thou to me, thou most hated foe of gods, of me, and of all mankind. 'Tis no proof of courage or hardihood to confront thy friends after injuring them, but that worst of all human diseases, loss of shame. Now look at the whole approach here. She's attacking a man and his manliness, his bravery. She calls him craven, which is coward. This is the same attack. Think about it, that Lady Macbeth makes on Macbeth. So we have here something which Shakespeare uses in his play. Now, when you're looking at this, I want you to think about how this play, how this character is interpreted over time. This play is around 4 ages. We're talking about, this is 400 years. Now, although Shakespeare goes out of fashion for a little bit, and they change how Lady Macbeth is a constant, and it's interesting. What you can tell about Lady Macbeth and what you can tell about the time is how they interpret Lady Macbeth. So we have the 18th century, this emotional, intense housewife type person. You can see her. She looks distressed. We have this domestic and practical, a Victorian housewife in the Victorian times with Ellen Terry playing her. And then we have the version which I think some of you have probably seen, which is this woman who is fierce. She's got no imagination at all, but she's really powerful and really strong-willed. The character and the interpretation of the character will change depending on the time. So when we talk about Lady Macbeth, another thing that you might wish to do is go back and look at pictures of her and how she is portrayed. These can add to your interpretations, and they can give you interesting contextual things to say, which aren't the boring things that everybody always says. Remember, interpretations and how a character is seen through time, especially for those of you aiming for higher marks. This is something that is impressive context rather than sort of bolted on all women were servants of men sort of context. Don't say that Lady Macbeth is shocking. She is the perfect wife for Macbeth. They are both ambitious. Her wishes are his. However, what you can say is she's the deciding influence in the murder. Although the witches and Macbeth's own willpower, and he's sort of going all over the place with if he's going to kill Duncan or not, it's his original idea. She does not put the idea in his head. She does what all women are believed to do at this time. She tempts. She persuades. Okay, now, she is the deciding influence. Now, they are close. There is love, and their ambitions and desires are the same. The relationship weakens as the play continues. But to argue that she is simply ambitious for herself, I would argue is wrong. And the reason I want you to look at this, I want you to think about this. She knows her husband's desires. She knows him really well. Think back to the other video which I made about Macbeth as the tragic hero, and the couple of points I've made in there for this one. But she asks for the strength to make up for his weakness, his inability to act. She calls on spirits that tend on mortal thoughts to help achieve Macbeth's desire. And how we know it's Macbeth's desire? Look at the phrasing of the line here. All that impedes thee from the golden round. Now, this repetition of thee is interesting. Thee is, it's a pronoun which we don't have this type of pronoun anymore. Thee is a pronoun that would have indicated closeness between the two characters. This indicates caring. When Macbeth speaks to her, he uses thee. It's interesting. She calls him thee in private, but when she talks to him, she says you, which is distancing, which I always find quite interesting. But notice over here, it's all that impedes thee from the golden round. She wants to get rid of everything that is in his way from the crown, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have crowned thee withal. She knows what his weakness is. She knows what he wants. She knows he wants to be king. She is willing to sacrifice her soul. She calls on dark spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. She is going to sacrifice everything to help him and to counteract his weakness. His weakness, of course, is the fact that Macbeth doesn't act. He wants all this stuff, but he never does it. She basically gives him the resolve. She knows, still going on this thing, she knows it won't take much to dominate her husband and manipulate him. And it doesn't. Let's be honest, all of this happens in less than 10 minutes. He goes from, I'm not going to do it, to, when you just do it, then you were a man. So she attacks his manliness. She thinks she knows the soldier in him. Soldiers don't fear. Art thou afeared? So she attacks his manliness. She attacks his soldier side of his body. And then she does the clincher, which is, from this time such I count thy love. In other words, you don't love me. She knows her husband loves her. Now, she knows how to manipulate her husband. Masculinity, bravery, love. And that's all it takes. A few words. She casts the murder as a heroic deed. It's an enterprise. It's like an adventure. He is afraid of failure and getting caught. Look at what she does for the last part of that speech, that scene in Act 1, Scene 7. He's afraid of failure, and it's, if we fail. All of her words after that are we. Everything about it, it's we'll not fail. We'll do this. It's put as a joint venture. So this is something they're going to do together. He is not going to be alone in this. She puts herself firmly in the action and makes herself part of this to strengthen him and to help him do what he needs to do. Now remember, Lady Macbeth in Shakespeare's time is still going to be considered fairly sheltered by most of the audience. She's still portrayed most of the time within the castle walls. The only time she is not in the castle walls is when she welcomes Duncan into the castle. And even then she's in the doorway, let's be honest. What you could argue with this is that she thinks because her husband is such an affront, and she obviously loves her husband and thinks a great deal of him and will sacrifice all of this for him, she thinks that he's just going to be brilliant at everything. So you could argue that her esteem for her husband then is almost something that makes her feel that even though he doesn't make a particularly great king, she thinks he'll be brilliant. Lady Macbeth is often described by critics as lacking in imagination. She doesn't see her husband as anything other than this amazing man, and she only sees him as this amazing lord and master because he's her lord. Now, what's also interesting is she never shows weakness to him. Every single time he is on stage, she is strong. She only admits weakness and fear to the audience. In Act 2, Scene 2, just after she's done all this stuff about go off, be strong, go kill the king, she reveals to us, that which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. She's needed to have a couple of drinks to go through with this. It's that whole idea of Dutch courage, drinking the alcohol to get rid of her inhibitions. She's afraid. She also shares with the audience, had he not resembled my father as he slept, I'd done it. She isn't this ruthless killer that she pulls herself out to Macbeth to be. She might be telling Macbeth that she's going to kill babies and all sorts of things. But her words here tell us that that's an act. Now, if we have a look over here, when Macbeth comes back on stage, she recovers her control. After this comment, where she's there talking about how, I couldn't kill him in his sleep. The sleeping in the dead are his pictures. As soon as Macbeth is losing it, she snaps to. Infirm of purpose, you're weak. I'm going to sort this out. Think about what's happening. There is a knocking at the door. If they're going to be kept, which happens very soon after this, if they're caught up at this stage, if they're covered in blood, well, Macbeth is, if he's caught at this point, they're done. If she doesn't step forward and take control at this point, if she keeps in her weakness that we see here, they are both dead. So she steps forward. She knows again how to control her husband and how to get that control over him and how to basically motivate him. You're weak, I'll take over. It's almost like she knows if she shames him a little bit, even though she couldn't even kill the king, she goes in there. She's going to make a show of this now so as Macbeth gets his spine back. She is strong when he needs her to be. And you see this throughout. She suffers as queen, but she never shares this with Macbeth. In Act 3, Scene 2, you see her, the first time you get her, and the first words you have where she's off stage and you hear her thoughts as queen. And she has this little soliloquy. Naught's had, all spent, where our desire is got without content. In other words, we don't have anything, but we've given everything away, and we're not happy. She shares that with the audience. To save it to be that which we destroy, then by destruction dwell in doubtful joy. So, in other words, it's safe to be Duncan and dead than kill and get this throne. She's got no pleasure in this role at all. She's not enjoying it. As soon as Macbeth walks back in, she changes. She's back to being strong. As soon as he walks in, it's, "How now, my lord?" She changes up and it's back in role. Macbeth does not confide his plans to murdering Banquo and Flails to her. It's interesting at this point. There starts to become a division between the two. He is trying to protect her now. Be innocent of the knowledge. It could be he's worried that she might stop him. But Macbeth, Lady Macbeth's part in the murders is finished now. He cuts her out of the murders. She's dealing with all of her conscience and all of her problems and qualms. Macbeth confides his mind being filled with scorpions. She doesn't. She keeps all of this to herself. So all of her weaknesses are kept to herself. And at this point, Macbeth is trying to protect her too, I would argue, being innocent of the knowledge. I'm going to take care of all of this now. He's going to prove that he's strong. He can take care of all of this. Lady Macbeth only has one more final moment of strength. That should be off. When Macbeth sees Banquo's ghost. Macbeth, at this point, Lady Macbeth isn't taking a leading role in this banquet until Macbeth starts going, "Oh my God, I'm not sitting there. Can you all see that?" basically. "Which one of you has done this? Do not shake thy gory locks at me." Macbeth is losing it. Lady Macbeth, "Sit, worthy friends." And then under a breath or off to him, Macbeth will decide, "Are you a man?" Basically, get yourself together. She steps forward here because, again, Macbeth is weak. And this is where Macbeth's weakness. He is murmuring, yelling out things about, "You can't say I did it. Don't shake your gory locks at me." Well, that implies he's murdered somebody, because in Shakespeare's time, they all believed that the only reason you'd see a ghost is if you'd murdered the person. Ghosts appear to them murderers. Ghosts appear to people who they have killed. Who have killed them, sorry. She appeals, "My worthy lord, your noble friends do lack you." She's trying to make him aware. There's lots of people here. You need to stop talking crazy. She also reveals to the audience after this, so she's tried to get control of this. It's also her who dismisses everybody. Basically, she tells them to go. Okay, and everybody goes. This is where she steps up, but she only steps up because Macbeth is weak. Macbeth is seeing things that nobody else can see. He is seeing Banquo's ghost. It's interesting that after this point, it's also where Macbeth's planning on seeing the witches, and she's going, "No, you just need to sleep. You lack the season of all nature's sleep." She is still trying to care for her husband, and it's this which reveals that they're both struggling with their conscience. Neither of them are sleeping. And that links back to that quote, if you think about it. I will do a talk which is on sleep in Macbeth, which so you can actually trace that through a little bit. That's an interesting line that keeps repeating this whole idea of not sleeping because you are guilty. Sleep becomes a motif for guilt. It's interesting that the only time she ever betrays Macbeth and the only time she shows weakness after this is in her sleep. She's self-control and willpower to counter Macbeth's doubt. The only time we see weakness from her is when she is sleeping. In Act 5, Scene 1, we see what's really going on in her head. We see her fears, we see her weaknesses. 1, 2, then it's time to do it. This takes us back to the night of Duncan's murder. She's reliving it. Remember, she strikes upon the bell. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's go. She's getting ready to go off and to do this. Why then? It's time to do it. Hell is murky. She feels she's in hell, and that hell idea is coming. This is basically her reliving that night that they killed Duncan. She is already in hell. We also see the fact that Macbeth isn't sharing anything with her. She has no idea what's going on. The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? The Thane of Fife's wife is Lady Macbeth. The audience see her and her children massacred in Act 4, Scene 2. She disappears. She doesn't know where she is. Where is she now? What's going on? And there's this other part, what with these hands never be clean. And that, again, that whole idea of having blood on your hands and the damn spot that she can't wash out and the repeated washing. The only time she ever gives anything away is this sleepwalking scene where she unwittingly, because she is walking and talking in her sleep, reveals what's gone on to the doctor and her servant. She kills herself off stage. So, and I would argue for this one, Shakespeare wants to focus on Macbeth. Macbeth has to be isolated at the end of the play, and he has to have lost everything and everyone. She was the last thing that he was holding on to. He wanted her well. He got the doctor trying to physic her, to basically make her better. It's interesting that her death is off stage, and the reason I think that's interesting is because Lady Macbeth is murdered on stage. It's almost like Lady Macbeth is now secondary. She is not part of this anymore. She ceased to be part of it after that initial push of Macbeth. That's all she does. Everything else is her beside Macbeth or stepping up to try and keep control of things. She's out of the picture now. There's a cry of women off stage. And then the servant comes back in to say, "The Queen, my lord, is dead." Macbeth has no time to grieve for her. He is under attack. I do think there is an issue when people argue that he doesn't react to Lady Macbeth's death. There is a soliloquy there where he talks about how life is lost all its meaning. He is miserable. She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. Okay, she shouldn't have died yet. She should have died after now. I don't have time to mourn. He's got to basically do the man thing, which is go off and run the battle. So it's interesting at the end there. Shakespeare wants us to see now that it is Macbeth alone. There is nobody left for him. She is also judged at the end. And I'm taking you back to the quote that I finished with last time as well, which is this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen. Fiend-like means like a devil. Think about how she is fiend-like, what image Shakespeare wants us to take from this. I also think this quote is open to interpretation for both of them. Is Macbeth just a dead butcher? Is Lady Macbeth just a fiend? Is she just a devil? Is that all we see her as? And what I would like you to do is come up with your own opinions on it. Read around. But that's the end for today. Please turn it into your notes. And I hope this all makes sense. Thank you.